Well, good morning, everybody. I thought I'd start off with just a reminder of how wild of a ride we're on with temperatures this week by showing you the forecast temperatures for this upcoming Saturday. So just have a look here. We've got places in the Midwest that we do expect to be back into the 70s by the time we get to next weekend. And I just show this because of where we are this morning. This was at 5:30 this morning as I was recording. We have places that are almost in the single digits in the central part of the United States. So pretty wild swing in these temperatures as the ridge that's now trying to build into the west, which has kind of shut down a lot of the precipitation in the west, is going to open into the central part of the United States. But we do have quite a bit of cold air, and this cold air is going to continue to dive into the south and east tomorrow while that more mild air begins to spread through the plains out of the western United States. And if you just have a look at Tuesday morning's low temperatures, I'm really kind of focusing here a lot on how far to the south these cold temperatures are going to make it. And just to get a better idea on that, we do have this image that shows the frost risk, right? And now we see that, this is going to try to get down there and touch Orlando. And even work its way over to some of those counties a bit further inland, but around Tampa. So this is some pretty cold air that is working its way into the south and well forecast. I think the models picked up on this early. We had a lot of analog support for this happening, and we kind of see the meteorological ingredients coming together to make this. Anyways, we do know it's going to change quite a bit as we go forward in time, but the reality is right now we've got freeze warnings that are out for a lot of the south, extending from Texas all the way over here to the southeast, and you can see these freeze warnings now pretty far into parts of Florida right down here. Now, in addition to this, we do have the red flag warnings across the south. Remember, this is an area that's been extremely dry. We're going to talk more about that in a moment here. And to the north of it, we do have the strong winds that are coming through the Great Lakes, producing what is honestly a pretty impressive lake effect snow event for this time of year, especially coming off of Lake Michigan. And of course, I focus a lot on that because it's near me, and I'm getting lake effect snow right now in Champaign, where I live, in east central Illinois. But we're going to watch a broad corridor in through here develop some pretty impressive lake effect snow showers and very intense lake effect snow right along the cusp here of northern Indiana, Chicago, which is getting a big band of lake effect snow right as I was recording this. And some of these snowfall totals could be quite impressive in this area. I can't pin them down because it's going to be super local, but there's the potential here for several inches of snow in this particular region. Now, speaking of snow, I want to show you Sunday's satellite data. A couple of things to look out for here. You can see the swath of snow here under the clouds. Of course, the snow doesn't move and the clouds do, and so you can see that. We were watching this to see how far it extended into eastern Iowa. That was going to be a very tricky forecast over the weekend. And models models were good in the last 24 hours at not extending the snow into this region. But now again, on the backside of this low, we're watching all the lake effect. As the sun was setting, did notice a couple things, some deeper storms in the south, as you can see here. And also we continue to monitor these wildfires that are in Arizona, one of our very, very dry spots. But in the overnight hours, the snow did come farther to the south. This is the Snodgrass backyard, and we have a couple of inches of snow. And it's kind of fun. When my kids wake up, I'll tell them, hey, you've experienced some lake effect snow, even though we are a couple hundred miles away from Lake Michigan. But as you can watch the deep low move through the eastern Great Lakes on the backside, this is what we're talking about. And this is a radar animation from last night right there. That's some of the banding of the snow getting wrapped up into this vorticity maximum to the south. And watching the lake effect snow come off of Lake Michigan yesterday, if you're a meteorologist, it's fascinating because we saw multiple what we call mesoscale vortexes, lake effect vortexes that showed up in the data here from the radar, and pinpointing exactly when and where these bands will go is what makes lake effect snow forecasting so difficult. You almost find yourself into a nowcasting situation rather than a forecasting. Now, some of the weather models pinned it. They got it. They were watching this just kind of slither out of southwestern Michigan into northern Indiana last night, and then came into Chicago this morning on very strong winds, and then wrapped itself into this upper level vortex that moved down here where I live. Also, a couple of other neat things you can see here. You can see some of the wind farms from the radar that was in Davenport, and also the one out of Lincoln, Illinois. Just some neat artifacts to pay attention to. But these winds have blown pretty far to the south. If you look at the low-level wind structure right now, that front that is diving its way through the United States is going to make it pretty far south, and you can even find the kind of the deformation happening in the Caribbean, including sending a big Tejano wind through here. Now, these kinds of events, if it's later in winter, I would be anticipating each follow-up system to move farther and farther and farther to the south. When you can establish such cold air like this, if it's midwinter, that just keeps driving the storm systems farther and farther south. But we're not quite there yet. And as a result, we're going to have to pay attention to a couple of features moving around to understand what the next system is going to look like and when it's going to arrive, both on the west coast and then traversing across the country. Take note of one thing, though. The Bermuda high is still over here. All right, so it's not returned home to open up the Gulf and just deliver lots and lots of moisture at this time of year. Okay, so temperatures quite a bit colder now than they were yesterday. You can see some of these spots down here in the south are 30 degrees colder than they were. We still have more cold air that's going to be driving its way to the south. But total precipitation over the last 72 hours, and this is through about 5:15 this morning, I just want to point out that this moisture, when it does melt, is going to be very much needed into this corridor and also in through here. It wasn't much. It was a little clipper system that rolled through. The west has gone over drier after what was a very wet last couple of weeks. We've remained very dry in the southwest and the southern plains, an area of concern going forward. But this moisture will get into the topsoil because it's going to melt as the temperatures revive, and we need it. I mean, take a look at the 40 centimeter or 16-inch soil moisture percentile, which again, as a reminder, percentile means rank. So we're looking over a history of data here at how this current soil moisture compares to our historical past. So we need all of it in this area. You can also see that down here farther to the south, across the Delta, getting into Texas, this region is very dry. But I have some good news for the south and the Midwest going forward as this pattern is kind of taking shape. It's not coming from the first system, right? Let's go ahead and have a look at that. 6 a.m. this morning, all right, well forecast. See where the band is right there? And you can see where the upper level vortex is. That's exactly what I just showed you on radar. We have rain moving through the northeast, lake effects beginning to take shape. The next front's coming into the northwest isn't a powerful one, so you can see here. But by 6 o'clock tonight, these heavy snows could be coming off the tail end of Michigan, Huron, Ontario. These are going to be wind parallel here initially. They may become shore parallel late. Heavier snows in New York, parts of Vermont, and then take a look right here on the windward side of the Appalachian Mountains. Playing it through the nighttime hours. There you go. Watch the winds shift this around to give us some shore parallel bands. And we're going to see another round, possibly of snow moving through this region as we work our way into Tuesday. The bulk of this cold air moves farther to the east. Now, by the time we get to middle of the week, we do have a system to be talking about in the west. And the questions are going to be, these next few systems coming to the west, do they kind of have the guts to get across the mountains? So we better get in there and kind of have a look at what that might entail. So I'm going to use the European ensemble. Now there's the depth of that low that you can see here, bringing in all that cold air. But that ridge I mentioned, that was over the west, here it is. By Tuesday into Wednesday, it's already pushed into the central U.S., just, thrusting those temperatures back up to not just average, but eventually above average. And here's later in the week. This is Thursday, November 13th. Deep trough coming into the west. This is going to be a snowmaker for the Sierra Nevada. The pattern is, in my opinion, open and moving. I don't see a lot of block in this, right? There's no big high over low. Maybe not until you get into the North Atlantic, but there's still wide open Rossby waves moving across the pattern. So this is Friday getting into Saturday. And what's interesting is that trough that came in on Wednesday, Thursday to the west wants to move over the mountains and stay upright. No major tilt to it. So I expect this to kick off a system that will likely pull in some Gulf moisture out ahead of it, although the presence of this low is limiting on that. Had there been a bigger area of high pressure here, we would have really opened this up, talked about a lot of severe weather to the south, but I still think it's going to be a potent system. But that, preceding low is going to kind of take some of the effort out of this system in producing some high impact weather. But this weekend through the Midwest and East, while another trough settles into the Pacific Northwest, what I'm noting here is that the farther out we go in the pattern, like the 20th, 21st, there's broader troughing in this area. And that could just give us some hint of southwest flow. And the reason I bring that up is because the week 2 forecasts are beginning to show that. Now, I know I kind of just completely skipped over the rest of this week, but I wanted to just take note of something. Those areas that I mentioned that were so dry here, and also in the southwest, it's extremely dry down here. When you get the flow doing this, that's what we need. Now, it's not subtropical in nature. We're not getting, Pineapple Express type stuff. But the jet has dipped its way down, and it's setting up the country for an active November 18th to 24 time frame. Now, as I said, that's a little, ahead of things, but I'm focusing on it because our last 2 weeks, notice how dry this whole region has been. And it extends farther into the plains and all the way up into Montana, around the Great Lakes, even though there's some good snow that came in here over the weekend, and even snowing through here. We've got to fill in some of these holes, which have been just getting deeper this fall, especially down here. This has been a major area of concern going forward. So over the next 7 days, remembering that we have a lot of activity coming in week 2, hey, this system this weekend is real here. And it starts off in the west. And I want to show you the details of this so we can kind of pinpoint timing and look at some of the snow in the west, but realize that much of the northern plains is going to miss out on this pattern because of how far to the south it goes. And without a big high pressure cell off the east pumping the moisture in, we're not going to return this to this region very easily. But there's some coming through the southwest, and certainly some moisture coming into the southern plains, Ozarks, over toward the Delta and Midwest. Okay? All right, here's the model side by side, GFS left, European right. Let's play the first system out. We've already seen that pretty well from the NAM model. We get into a pretty benign midweek. This is Wednesday. Watching a little system roll over the Great Lakes from Ontario into Quebec and the Northeast. It's in both models. And then the GFS did finally cave to the European solution for the system this Thursday. Remember, we talked about that a bit on Friday. Now you can see how they're much more in agreement by this Thursday for the West, including what could be some really good snow for the Sierra late this week. Now that low comes over the top. There it is. This is now by Saturday. And begins to open up some moisture. See, there is high pressure here. It's just not the monster high that can really just drive this flow in. But I'm out here 156 hours in the forecast, and both models are picking up on a feature that is even linked up to this system rolling through Canada, bringing some snow into the Hudson Bay as an example. And it looks pretty good. Even the next system seems to be well timed in the models all the way out 6-7 days. So we play this one forward. And what will likely happen is we're going to have a low here and a low there, and they're going to be linked like that. Can you kind of see how that's taking shape here? The GFS, in typical fashion, is trying to move the low faster than the European model. The European model leaves this lingering frontal boundary pretty far back to the west. It's not too big of a difference, but it's something to take note of. And then early next week, watch the next system come through the northern Rockies delivering some snow. And we're just going to continue to watch. There's another low coming into the Pacific Northwest, and the potential for another system, good 10 days from now in the southern plains. And that's why we saw that week 2 forecast look pretty healthy. Now, total precipitation, let's look at just the total liquid side of this, or equivalent, I should say. We're playing now through Friday. See that system coming into the west? That's Thursday, Friday. And then as we go forward, it opens up here into the southern plains according to the European model. Let's just go ahead and take it out 10 days. And you can start to see the holes to the north. But we've got multiple systems in the northwest, although there's a break for through the middle part of this week. Late this week, though, that's coming through, and we need every drop of this in this area here. That's the European model. Here's the GFS solution for the same time frame. Take note that it is drier throughout much of the plains, getting back into the Canadian prairie, but there are some similarities we need to take note of here. But if you're out on ag weather and you are kind of pinpointing your location, do expect significant model differences, okay? I do want to show you some probability maps very quickly. This is the chance over the next 10 days at staying under 1/10 of an inch. So we start to see that corridor through the plains, the western plains, the high plains getting back into the Canadian prairie. We do see drier conditions, and the presence of high pressure over Florida is drier as well. But if you kind of bump this up to say, well, who's on the wetter side of it, that's the chance at getting over an inch. Okay, so that next system coming through is starting to bring up those probabilities in this very dry corridor. And just to make note here of how wet it is going to be throughout the west, we're looking at, like I said, you probably saw 3 systems in the 10-day forecast. And that middle one coming next Thursday, Friday is a big one for California, which needs this moisture pretty badly. All right, snowfall, just to kind of give you the update on that. Let's flip the model order here and let's do GFS first. So again, watch this the next 2 days. Very important to keep an eye on. Same with the Appalachian Mountains and upstate parts of New York, getting into northern Vermont and parts of Quebec. But then this is Thursday, Friday, Saturday. See the model really putting in some snows here to the Sierra and parts of the Intermountain West. But overall, let's just take it out 10 days. That's your total snowfall forecast. And the European model 10-day looks something like that. All right. So just have a good look at these. Remember, you can go and look at all the regional maps on agweather.com. Okay, next, I do need to talk more about these winds because we are watching, look at this Monday into Tuesday, the stronger winds coming through the midsection of the country, out of the Canadian prairie. And then look, this is Thursday, Friday. Watch the west. Very strong winds into Northern California. And as I've said the last several videos, we're just into an active time period. There is going to be strong synoptic scale flow with this, meaning that the dynamics are good. All that means is there's temperature contrast that results in pressure contrast that creates wind, and these systems are going to go. That temperature profile setting it all up. But since we're on this theme of precip, I did just want to show you that European is not the only model pulling in these wet conditions. And I do want you to note that while the European's wetter in the northwest, the AI and the GFS are giving it a bit of a break into week 2, given that the flow is going to dip farther into Southern California and come out of that southwest direction temporarily. So we'll keep an eye on the Pacific Northwest out there into week 2 to see if this does, in fact, manifest itself as the AI and GFS says, or if it looks a bit more similar to what we've got in the European model. Okay, back to the temperatures. Here's the max temperatures for today. And as we mentioned, all that warmth in the west begins to bleed into the central U.S. Tuesday, Wednesday. By Thursday, it starts to run out all the colder air that's here. By Friday, big warm up as the trough. Remember, this is now the deep trough that's coming in, putting in the snow here, is working its way out. And so this little roller coaster ride of temperatures, and I showed you this at the beginning where we're back into the 70s by Saturday here. We're expecting this to just go up and down pretty routinely here through the end of November. I wanted to show you the matrix of temperatures because I'm really honing in a lot on what the GFS ensemble is suggesting. Notice in day 5 through 10, while all this warmth returns, this cool down is expected coming out of Alaska to British Columbia and into the Canadian prairie. And the model's more aggressive on opening up that colder air to slide through a lot of the country. And we're expecting this to be the case, especially as we move in toward the month of December, that we're going to access quite a bit of this colder air. Now, to build that story and show you, kind of what we're overall thinking about, I want to just take note. You're going to hear, if you tune into a lot of meteorologists, you're going to hear a lot of chatter about, MJO, maybe rolling over here to phase 8 and 1. I'm still not convinced it's going to get out of phase 6 or 7 right now. And I think that's important. Now, if the Indian Ocean dipole just disappeared and we saw the trade winds in the Pacific take over, you know what it would do? It would just come diving like this and then come around. And that would be a crazy winter. I just don't think it's going to happen right away. And as a result, when I start to see the velocity potentials just line up like this, okay, this is history, this is forecast. That is sitting right over phase 6. That's not giving me this clue that this was going to continue. Can you see that? That we kind of threw the brakes on that, and we're now looking into this area. And we spent all of last week detailing that. So I'm not going to just keep beating that dead horse. I just think it's what it's going to do. And I think it's going to be important to understanding that this is the likely pattern, as we finish November and get into December. I love this new CPC forecast. Makes a ton of sense based on what we just talked about, right? And as we look at it, my only concern is if we get a true phase 6 pattern, I think that they've got this too cold and this too wet, unfortunately for the West Coast. But, there's other factors. MJO is not the only determining factor here. But I do want to point out now that both our European and GFS model for the beginning of December has opened this channel to cold air. And that has been in the forecast. You can go back and watch everything we did last week. That was our prediction. Models are coming into alignment with this. There's a lot of agreement in the meteorological community over this. And I think we're just starting to feel a bit more confident that expect Arctic intrusions in December, even late November. But they're coming. And it's pumped along by multiple factors. IOD, La Nina, polar vortex disruptions, the cold water that's showing up in the Gulf of Alaska. I mean, look at this. There is a lot of reason to think that this pattern is going to do that. Now, what I don't want you to hear me say is that it's going to be like the record coldest 89 mega, cold December. No, I think it's going to have this flow to it, like right now. I mean, it's snowing today in my backyard, and it's going to be 70. My son is going to, I can't understand what that kid wears to school. He might wear a t-shirt today to school and then wears a sweatshirt on Friday. But anyway, it's going to be one of those just flip-flops. And we should expect to continue to see that. Not just where I keep talking about the Midwest, but the whole country. Now, you've been staring at the ocean temperature map. I've got a reason for this. We told you back, I don't know, in September, that one analog year that sticks out is last year. But this was last year. Okay, right now. November 8th this year, November 8th last year. We had a La Nina. It was struggling. We did not have as strong of a negative Indian Ocean dipole as we do now. See it? And the water temperatures now in the Gulf of Alaska are significantly colder than they were last year. But I do want to just talk about it for a moment because there are still ideas around last year. So you say, well, what happened? Well, the temperatures did this. For December, January, and February, we saw more mild days here. December was mild, but January just brought brutal Arctic intrusions that work their way to the east. All right? So that's why the December, January, February maps look like this. Last winter was cold in the second half of it here. Very mild there. The precip pattern was fascinating, okay? We were still targeting in early December this corridor. And then look at this. That region right into there on either side dry. Major snow drought in the north. Heavy snows down in New Orleans. It was a pretty wild winter. Now, the reason I show you that is because I need you to see what was forecast for last winter. So on Weather Bell, I can go back and bring up last November 2024's prediction for December, January, February 24-25. Got it? So this is the precip pattern that happened. This is what was forecast. And a major swing and a miss in parts of the Northwest. Now, we got it here. There was moisture in through this corridor, so that was a miss for Northern California too. And yes, so they were drier here and hotter here. But this was a miss as well. Right? Sorry. Just want you to see that. Now, why? What happened last year that was very tricky to forecast was actually right here over the Aleutian Islands. December to February, we saw low pressure continually form in this area. And what it did was it displaced high pressure 1 to Alaska. That helped the cold air come out, but it also pushed high pressure to the west coast, which kind of ruined the flow. And the reason I bring that up is because for me right now, as I think about the way winter is shaping up, I'm trying to figure out what that Pacific high is going to be. I am not settled on anything in the North Atlantic yet, so I can't comment on it. The NAO, the Arctic Oscillation, this North Atlantic pattern that can set up, I don't know where it's going to go just yet. So I'm focusing a lot on the Pacific, and here's what I want to know. By December, do we actually build in higher pressure here? Does it stay in January? Look, January is trying to open this higher than average pressure there. What about February? Do we anchor high pressure higher than normal in this region? Because if that's the case, there will be no trouble with flow across the U.S. and access to cold air. And that means winter. I mean, real winter, like the winters we remember from, past. And is the Bermuda high, is it way over here, or is it going to pump moisture at times? I'm just showing you all of this as a reminder, because if you come into the U.S. and you look at the precip, let's do the seasonal anomalies. Okay, you're like, shoot, that's what it said last year. Remember? I mean, where did I put that? Nope. There. That was last year's December, January, February. That's this year's. So you're like, well, okay. Is this just what the model says every December when there's a La Nina? Yes, it does. But can I make a bit of a case for why I think we're going to be seeing less risk of this being drier? Less risk of this being really dry? I think if you plant high pressure over the Aleutian Islands, we get away with a winter here that's, I think, just better for the overall drought situation. Now, that's me being an optimist, which I am always a glass half full kind of guy. You can put one drop in the bottom of the glass. I'm like, yeah, it's half full. So you have to know that about me. But I'm starting just to see things come together that, man, if we prevent that low from being there, and there's high pressure here, we will change the whole North American pattern. And I think the North Atlantic will respond in kind. A lot of negative North Atlantic oscillation, negative AO, supporting the cold air, the snow, supporting systems getting all the way from west to east coast. Now, if I'm wrong with that, I'm going to tell you right away. Like, hey, shoot, we blew it. That's not right. We've got to change this whole thought process. But, at this point in November, I think we've got a chance. All right. Now, who else cares about this pressure pattern is in South America, where the newest update on Friday for planting progress in Mato Grosso showed, again, they fell way off the historical average. Historical average should be 90%. We're at 85.5. Last year at 93.72. So, this is 8-10% off of normal. But I'm curious why that happened, because some of the data would suggest there were decent rains in this area. I mean, Mato Grosso's here. And these were pretty well forecast. What's interesting is where the rain is going. That is a lot of dry air that starts in Minas Gerais, going through Goiás, Tocantins, Mato Grosso. I mean, it's going to rain. There's going to be some rain in here, but it's drier than average. All the really wet weather is in Mato Grosso do Sul and Paraguay, while Argentina is dry. We've been concerned about Argentina being drier. And for weeks, we watched the models battle over this, and now they agree. Look at that. Pretty good agreement for the next 2 weeks. And when it gets dry here, expect it to get hot. Sorry, let's go back. This is looking through the next 8 or 9 days. Much above average temperatures here, which means we could put some early stress on the crops. Now, I don't think we should read much into this. Okay, I think if it continues through more than just the next couple of weeks, it could become a story. But Brazil always has this advantage where they can out-acre some of their weather problems, and we can't forget that, all right? Okay, that is my story. That's where we're going to start this narrative off this week. Matt will pick it up tomorrow. I look forward to talking to you again midweek. Have a good one. Thanks.